Welcome to the ADR Lunchtime series. It's a program presented by the Workplace Conflict Management section of the Interagency Alternative Dispute Resolution Working Group in coordination with the Department of Energy's ADR office. Many of you may recognize me from previous presentations, and for those who don't, or perhaps for those who are attending the ADR Lunchtime series for the first time today, my name is Adam Kerfman, and I'm an attorney in the ADR office here at the Department of Energy. Today is an important day as we celebrate International Conflict Resolution Day, and we are very excited to have you join us. As always, thank you to all in attendance and to those whose efforts make today possible. Richard Cronin, the ADR office's director, Isabella Faraz, my ADR office teammate, Lee Blackard, our technical support extraordinaire, and the many individuals, including fellow ADR enthusiasts and our interagency colleagues, who support and help spread awareness for the ADR Lunchtime series. Today's topic is important and timely as many people are yearning to figure out ways that they can move forward in a very uncertain time. We therefore consider it quite the privilege to have Dr. Mary Atwater, a clinical psychologist, wellness coach, and mediator, join us for today's presentation. Dr. Atwater is a proud veteran of the United States Air Force and received her higher education in Colorado, culminating in a doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of Denver. Dr. Atwater has a noted background in psychological assessments, including working in multiple research labs and completing a postdoctoral internship conducting assessments for brain injury patients in Washington, D.C. She speaks on many mental wellness topics, including flexible thinking and empowering authentic leadership, and maintains her balance by cooking, swimming, and appreciating each day's sunrise and sunset. Per Dr. Atwater's request, please have a paper and pencil handy if you can. Without further ado, I turn the virtual podium over to Dr. Mary Atwater.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Adam and Isabella, for giving me this opportunity to speak today. It's quite a privilege. And I want to welcome everyone. Happy Conflict Resolution Day. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm very glad that you're here today. When Adam and Isabella helped me choose the topic for today, I believe there was a general consensus that people are feeling a bit uneasy and uncertain. Uneasy about a lot of things, maybe their job, whether they're working from home or working remotely. The state of the government, our health, our safety, and that of family and friends. I hope my talk today will provide you with some encouragement and practical, useful tools that offer some relief for your unease, be that at your work or in your personal lives. I do believe that what we endure and that our experiences help us adapt and make us stronger. I know something about enduring, adapting, and surviving, the struggle to change, to accept, the need to let go, and the courage to move forward. You've heard about my background and my work experience, my degrees, and the other things I'm doing in the DC area. My talk today also includes lessons from my personal life experiences, and I'll touch on a few of them briefly. I am the seventh of 10 children from an Irish Catholic family. We moved a lot when I was growing up, and I always was the new kid. My father was a Navy officer, and we still moved even after he separated and went into the private sector. The moving, adapting, sometimes felt like living in the movies, the TV shows. We would either be in the scene from the game Jumanji or the movie Airplane or even Casablanca, and I still hear leaving on a jet plane in my mind often. Of the many things I've faced and accepted, most recently is my struggle with chronic pain, which began in my 30s. In my 40s, I had debilitating headaches, and I almost died from a brain aneurysm. But luckily, Georgetown Hospital had the medical miracle that allowed me to survive. Prior to my diagnoses, I had begun studying Buddhism. The silent retreats I attended, along with my meditation practice, helped me and my family through some pretty scary years. Today, I want to share with you what works for me and my clients. My talk today is not how to fix, but hopefully provide ways to consider accepting what is and some useful tools to benefit anyone willing to think differently and to open to do what is in their best interests to move forward. So here we go. Trying to navigate this. So today's discussion, Ctrl-Alt-Shift and Reboot to move forward, using flexible thinking to create next steps. My presentation today is ambitious. It's going to be presented in 4 sections. Though this is a virtual lecture of some sort, my style is usually very interactive and not didactic. I have an expectation that you will work right along with me. That said, I'll be asking you to write down your thoughts. So please have paper and pen handy. And I'll ask you to pause sometimes just to consider your thoughts or your reactions to what I've been talking about. My work and experience leads my belief that we learn by doing. Insight, I think, comes from doing something different. Section 1 is going to be about control. And our minds provide us with strong defense mechanisms that can really get in the way of adapting even to necessary change. Section 2 is about alternatives and our options. Those provide us with opportunities to increase our ability to be psychologically flexible in thinking and doing, such as acceptance and action to move forward. Section 3 is about shift or shifting, action to move forward, both cognitively and physically, to support letting go of what's in the service of living well. Section 4 is a recap. Once we have established what living well looks like, considering the workable options to build a plan to move forward and to live well. 22 years ago, early in my training as a clinical psychologist, I was introduced to a science-based theory of human behavior called acceptance and commitment therapy. Dr. Stephen Hayes is a researcher at the University of Nevada in Reno, and he and 2 others, Dr. Wilson and Dr. Storzal, are the founders of acceptance and commitment therapy. Why is this important? ACT posits that clients are not broken. Most people have the resources that they need, but they need some help tapping into those resources. ACT theory holds that in order to take a new direction, you have to let go of the old direction. Principles in ACT encourage participants to live well based on what they believe has value and meaning, not some life constructed from an obscure notion of what happiness is. The 2 important tools to attain and maintain psychological flexibility are one's ability to accept and their willingness to move in a direction that they value. Using my training and experience as a clinical psychologist and a mediator, I coach clients in both wellness and conflict resolution. We review what they believe adds meaning and value to their lives. We identify behaviors that keep them stuck or trapped in avoidance. And then we build acceptance around what they can actually control and what they can change. Control maintains the status quo. At this time, everyday life's filled with uncertainty, and some have described it as they feel like they're on hold, like there's some giant pause button out there. Everyone seems to be waiting for something to happen. Many say quietly, but also out loud, I just want to get back to the way that it was before this pandemic. It seems impossible to predict what comes next. We're all waiting for the next chapter of the days of our lives. Change is difficult. It's actually quite easy to just stand still or hunker down sometimes. In these past few months, how many times have you heard, when is this going to be over? When will this end? When will we go back to normal? Everyone keeps talking about getting back to normal or that this will be the new normal, but that statement doesn't really work. Because we're trying to live and get through and survive in a pandemic. Going back to normal doesn't really look like it will happen. We need a different perspective, something to help support not only the changes that we are currently facing, but those that are waiting around the corner. I like to reframe a sense of normal to a sense of workable. What works and what doesn't work. So let your mind play with that for just a minute. And if you want to write that down on a piece of paper, what works and what doesn't work for me, just consider that. Examples: 1 cup of coffee may work and 3 might not. 8 hours of sleep may help and 4 hours probably won't. Waking at noon depends on what you plan to accomplish that day and what time zone your boss or coworkers are working from. In a pandemic, staying healthy works and getting sick does not. Being stuck doesn't work either. There is no new normal coming. There will always be change, and you can get out in front of it, accepting this time, these circumstances, then considering what will work for you. What are your options, and how will you make them work for you? As humans, we become wired to seek pleasure and to avoid pain. Just saying the word change can evoke thoughts of really ugh and this is going to be difficult. People avoid change until it catches up and takes over. So really, change is inevitable. Preparing for and making a course to a destination might seem sort of easy, but it's also staying on that course, accepting the change is what's really difficult. Oh, one too many. Oop, change can appear really monolithic, like too big, too much. Another reason change is difficult is because it really can feel like it's too much, too big. When our eldest was 4, like most 4-year-olds, she really hated cleaning her room. The room was quite a mess, and she would cry and say, "I just can't do it." When I finally heard her say, "I don't know how," I sat down on the floor with her and saw the mess from her eyes. And I said, "Let's start by picking up anything that is red or pink." That little crack in, "I don't know how," soon turned into a game of how to clean up my room. Recently, I read about a woman who managed to lose over 100 pounds in 1 year. That's pretty daunting. Losing 100 pounds, many would give up before tackling such a monolithic shift. Change takes a shift in perspective of what's possible and what's doable. This brave woman started with just one thing. She changed what she ate for breakfast. After that, she changed what she ate for lunch and then dinner, taking one meaningful step in the direction of what she said she wanted, believed in her best interest, small steps towards the action. The self-talk is 1 red sock, 1 pound at a time, all movement towards what is valued. Oops, okay, I'm not doing this so well. Change can also be a lot to manage because it really does challenge our balance. Another reason why it's difficult is it's also a direct challenge to our existing sense of control, our old habits, our old ways of thinking and doing. Our feeling about control may try to correct, and then we try to overcorrect. So you see, it really is a balancing act. It's not easy to find balance and then to maintain it. The balance is physical, cognitive, and emotional. Staying balanced, staying on course, requires flexible thinking of what is possible, what's necessary, and workable. It helps to visualize a desired outcome, an outcome to living well. Real change, staying on the course kind of change, requires some self-talk that is positive, encouraging, and compassionate. Yelling at a 4-year-old is not workable. Positive encouragement and compassion helps facilitate the movement towards the desired change. So, is what you're doing working? If I asked you this, if you woke up and tomorrow your life was better, what would that look like? Is what you're doing right now working for you? Are you living well? Is this a life that you value and that you love? To begin the discussion on what is of value, we need to also describe the difference between a value and a goal. A goal is scored when it crosses the goal line. You either score or you don't. A value is something that you don't attain. It's not a score. You get it done because it's what you are living, for what you are doing each day, engaged in living what you value. Goals are what we assemble to get closer to our values. For example, if your goal is to lose 10 pounds, you would probably go on a diet and exercise. Once you lose that 10 pounds, you've scored your goal. By contrast, living a healthy life becomes the way that you live, moment by moment, towards a valued direction of health and wellness. You never actually get there like one and done, but it is the journey that feels pretty good and purposeful. So back to what it is that you value and what does that look like? But ask yourself this question: my life would be better if or when? So having that paper and pen is what we need to do right now. I'd like you to think about the things that bring value to your life or you consider to be of value and write those down. You don't have to write down a paragraph or full sentences. Just write down some words about what's valuable to you, what you believe in, what you believe has value. Thich Nhat Hanh said that if you believe in protecting the earth, if you say that you care about the environment, when you throw a can out that can be recycled, you feel a little bit sick inside. It's just going against what you say. Living your values means talking about your walk and then walking your talk. Take another minute to write down some more thoughts. We'll circle back to this later on in the presentation. Now we're going to start a YouTube clip, or I should say, Isabel are going to try and help me start this clip. Hopefully you do it better than I'm doing the PowerPoint. So the clip is to help sum up why change is difficult, why we struggle with change. It's also about uncertainty, but it's also about how difficult it is to change, how our thoughts and our emotions can keep us from moving towards what we declare has meaning and value. So ready to go when you guys are.
Great, and thank you, Dr. Atwater. So what I've done is I'm having a little bit of technical issues using the multimedia viewer. However, I've sent the link to the video in the chat box to everyone. So you should have the link right there. you can click on that, and then you'll be the one to control the video. So please take the time to watch it, and then when we're able to finish, we'll come back and jump back into the presentation.
Okay, it takes about 3 minutes.
This is a story of human motivation. Humans are motivated equally in two directions: to move away from things we don't want and to move towards things we do want. And this is a jolly good idea. It's a particularly good idea for things happening in the external world. But then humans invented language, and we developed words for things, including things happening in our internal world, like thoughts and emotions. And then we applied the same rule. Being clever, we classified difficult feelings like anxiety, doubt, and uncertainty as things to move away from, and emotions like happiness, excitement, and relief as things to move towards. This makes intuitive sense. But applying the away and towards rule to our internal world leads to problems. Think about something you've done that you're really proud of, like running a marathon or passing an exam. And then think about the early days or moments when you were moving towards this achievement. What were your thoughts and emotions then? The short-term result of moving towards something we really value is usually negative thoughts and uncomfortable emotions. So our minds tell us to move away, just as if we saw a bear or a moving bus. Then, if we do move away, the first emotion that shows up is relief. So to summarise, language has encouraged us to try and move away from bad or difficult thoughts and emotions and to move towards good ones. But this is a trap, because it can mean we move away from what matters most to us in life. This is called experiential avoidance. Experiential avoidance can work in the short term, but the problem is it doesn't tend to work in the long term. If we make it a priority to avoid difficult emotions, we start to construct our lives around avoiding things we don't want rather than moving towards things we do want. So what do we do about this? In order to beat experiential avoidance, we firstly have to understand what our values really look like. What do we really want from life? Then we need to help people to build their willingness here, to experience these difficult thoughts and emotions, in order to keep moving towards here. We can't have love without fear of rejection. We can't achieve greatly without fear of failure. And we can't change our lives for the better without worrying that we will change for the worst. There is no way around this. It is the human condition. But we can cultivate the ability to experience difficult thoughts and emotions in the service of what matters most to us. This is called psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility helps us build a life around towards moves rather than away moves. Whilst this can hurt, we get to do the things in life that matter most, and this makes a difference.
Okay, great. So I think most people should be finishing up with the video. If not, you have the link, so you can definitely go back and watch it all the way through in case you haven't finished. But now we'll turn it back over to Dr. Atwater.
Oh, thanks. I hope you were able to access that. It's quite entertaining and funny, and it helps us understand how our brain can be so strong and keeps us trapped in accepting necessary change. So the construct they're talking about is called experiential avoidance. And experiential avoidance doesn't work in the long run because it teaches us to lean into fear, into doubt. And then people kind of build their internal world around what's negative, what might happen. And so they give up on their dreams, they give up on moving forward. And everyone really has that same struggle. Avoidance is really built into our brain and the way that we move through the world. It's also very old wiring, not necessarily bad, but avoidance shuts down opportunities and it limits growth. We are wired to survive. And so it's really easy to let the brain be on autopilot. The video talks about avoidance, walking away from your values or walking towards your values. If we're not walking towards our values, we're probably stuck somewhere in pain or fear or feelings, whether they be bad or sad or mad, which comes at the cost of the opportunities of living our lives. Avoiding the potential of risk of pain or anxiety or fear stops us from living our values and what we say we love. Avoidance causes loss of opportunity for joy and for happiness. So section 2 is control influences our alternative options. Everything you know, how you think and how you feel about the world is a product of your DNA, your life experiences, family you grew up in, your culture, your society. These things provide the context for your life and shape your brain's reactions and thoughts, your feelings and your choices. Using yet another computer metaphor, it's sort of a bit like inserting a software labeled chaos. Life throws a lot at us. We need a software application that will help us structure that chaos into useful, workable data, useful and workable thinking, feeling, and actions. Your phone gets regular updates, and the human brain needs updates to adapt. When we are able to increase our ability to think flexibly, to act flexibly, we lessen the need for the brain's habit to control. Flexible thinking encourages options to adapt to current and future obstacles. Adapting our original programming to survive in the 21st century by lessening the reactions to fighting tigers and bears, and instead supporting goals and behaviors to attain and maintain living well. For example, acknowledging the tendency towards avoidance and responding with encouragement, with acceptance. So when we're avoiding, you might ask yourself, what am I having trouble accepting? So with my patients, myself, and also with my patients with chronic pain, there's a lot of work to pretend that you're not in pain, that you're okay, and you're just fine. Somehow being in pain or feeling pain, we think of it as a weakness that makes us fragile. And pretending not to be in pain gets in the way of taking care, of actually reducing the pain somewhat. Unable to acknowledge or accept anything, fill in the blank, disables problem solving and option generation. One former client of mine, debilitated by her pain, in and out of bed, understood that her life was less than what she had hoped for. The pain kept her from living well. Her pain was real, but her suffering was secondary, what she was not able to do, the life she was missing out on because of the pain. Working on accepting her pain helped her to plot a course to live with the pain. Pain was real. Unable to accept it was causing her suffering. Suffering of what happened and why, wishing for a fix or a pill to make it all go back to what she thought of as normal. She was quite stuck. So why do we get stuck? Well, again, we are wired to survive. And what we need to do to survive now is to add some new updates, some new applications to our brain. So let's take a closer look at how the brain is wired actually to keep you stuck. This gold arrow here represents an automatic survival instinct. Think of it as a robust superhighway of communication. It has tremendous command and control. The limbic system is the beginning. It tells the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex in the body what to do, survive. The red arrows, the smaller ones, the newer communication connection is the prefrontal cortex back to tell the limbic system to stand down. And we've got this. There's no need to panic. The update needed to move forward to make the red arrows as strong as that super gold highway. All human beings have this amazing thing called the prefrontal cortex. Animals do not, but humans do. It's a powerful and somewhat untapped part of our brain that provides us with cognitive abilities of self-awareness, inhibition, working memory, self-regulation, motivation, reasoning, planning, and problem solving. Problem solving is very important during this difficult time right now. Enduring and adapting to new situations requires skills to compare outcomes, to consider options, and to deduce the probability of success over failure. As I've said, our brain is biased for survival. The limbic system, when it's on, it really doesn't listen to the prefrontal cortex. It's there to make sure that we live. It tells the prefrontal cortex to just stop talking and mostly just to obey. And this is adaptive until it's not. So when there's a fire and you want to survive, the limbic system tells you to move to the nearest exit. You just do it. The trouble begins when we're struggling, feeling a bit hopeless, down, but not yet out, like during this pandemic. When life seems uncertain, the normal isn't coming back anytime soon or never. Our pre-wired, fixed brain finds it easier to let the limbic system do the driving. But there is another way that is more adaptive, more resilient in these times of difficulty and uncertainty. It requires that we put the time in and to do the work to strengthen that connection. These little red arrows. Calming the limbic system down, like breathing, exercising, going outside, taking a walk, staring at a tree, holding our pets. Calming the limbic system, breathing to remain present in the here and now, helps our brain shift out of autopilot to the place where we can think. We can do wise thinking, find time to gather information, get more facts, to check the facts, consider options and probabilities, time to problem solve so that we are moving in a direction that is adaptive. Change, adapting to the current circumstances requires careful planning and consideration of what's in your best interest. So I keep talking about new apps. I mean new applications, just like you would update your computer or your phone. If you start at the bottom, we really do need a foundation for optimal thinking. Cognitive capacity is our ability to think quickly, our ability to think purposefully, our ability to make really good decisions. So I tell all my clients that I work with, if you don't work on your diet, good sleep, and exercise. There's really not a lot I can do about everything that comes after. You really do need a foundation. Improved cognitive capacity allows us to consider options at work and to make sound reasoned decisions. Without a foundation, we can be really overwhelmed, hard to find uncertainty. Our brains are pretty much mush. It's hard to think, to balance, to stay grounded. Without a foundation, control and avoidance just keeps maintaining the status quo. Without a strong foundation, our worries and our fears trap us in the past with what happened there then, and even some trauma about what's happened to us in our lives, or kind of frozen and immobilized into the future of like, whoa, what if that happens? These really shut down your options to do something different. Your brain struggles to stay focused when it becomes trapped and fused. If it's not focusing in on the here and now, you don't really have a lot of control over what you could do here and now. This next slide depicts the vicious cycle. My PowerPoint these should be flashing, but if you think about it, our habits get in the way of our willingness and our flexibility. You get a fused thought that this isn't possible, or this is awful, or it'll never be good again. That then adds to more inflexible thinking, and then we tend to avoid. And then our fear and our anger and our sadness can just compound themselves. Our thought processes are, I can't do this, I can't accept this. This actually does impact the neurochemistry of our brain. We just sort of reinforce fear, we reinforce mad, we reinforce anxiety, and then it starts all over again. So our options, we can alter them, we can choose options, and one of them is the courage to be willing to flexibly think, to be open. To be open to a wider view, a greater perspective, to eliminate possibilities, to wonder, to be curious about thoughts, beliefs, and habits, observing and inquiring and asking what else could be true. Courage to imagine what is possible and probable. How can you see yourself doing that? How can you see yourself feeling that? Think of all the great musicians or artists or writers, leaders. They all visualized what's possible. In my work, working with couples and co-parents, parents and teens, I often try to help them to see what the other person sees, to be open and curious rather than mad and angry, encouraging getting behind the other person's eyes to see what they see, to try to gain perspective. Adam, is there anything I need to clarify from this point? I don't want to keep going if people have dropped a construct or something.
So I think right now we're all good. Again, if people have any substantive questions for the speaker, please feel free to direct them to me, and I'm happy to ask Dr. Atwater at the appropriate time.
All right, so now we're going to shift. We're going to find some skills about learning to shift, to accept, that would support valued action, flexible and workable. I like this picture because it really reminds me of what it feels like to be flexible, the skill it takes to ride a wave. It's not easy, but with some patience and practice, it's doable. Flexible thinking is similar. Once you have centered and found balance, you can ride that wave, whatever comes. You can be better prepared for life. Remember, to move forward, you need to let go of what was pain, and loss, and sadness. It's not easy. Looking forward, thinking flexibly. What if your joy was determined by your actions today and tomorrow? What would you be willing to do to shift and to move towards living well? I like to think about cognitive bias as a form of avoidance. It's a mind game. Mind games that your survival mind plays to help it maintain control. It doesn't want to let go of control. Bias doesn't want you to know more. It doesn't want you to learn more. It wants you to just go with it. The best way to confront bias is to try and pay attention to whatever information diet you're consuming. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you curious about? Most people are unaware of the bias that shapes how they think and feel. When making any important decision, it is wise to gather all the relevant facts. Why would you buy a house without knowing who owns it and if that title was free and clear? You need to be curious and open. Well, let's talk about bias. Our verbal behavior shapes what we think, how we feel, and what we believe is true. A lot of times, from our perspective, we're right, and many of us have an ignorance of the probability. We think either in a 0 or 100%. We're also bombarded by negativity bias. We're struck by loss versus gain. We really fear loss more than we understand gain. And then there's the thing called confirmation bias. Reality can be so complex that it's equally valid observations from differing perspectives can appear to be contradictory, but they're true. From the person on the right, there's only 3. From the person on the left, there's 4. So the bias is that if you're right, the other person is wrong. This is one of my favorite cartoons. I've mediated custody issues and worked with parents and teens. It helps to remind everyone that each person at the table has a strong feeling that they are right. Conflict comes from wanting the other person to be wrong. Helping my clients see that each person has a perspective that is valid is part of mediation. A mom I worked with who couldn't get her son to listen to her, she kept telling her son that what a horrible jerk his father was. But from his view, his dad wasn't what she believed him to be, the story she was telling. The son needed his mom to see what he saw, to feel what he felt, to look behind his eyes. Another bias is probability. It's higher math, but it's not hard to really comprehend if you think about it simply. I call it the least percent rule. We tend to focus in and rally around to prevent an imagined significant event. This is anxiety times 100. We rally around what could happen at the expense of what may not happen. What happens to the opportunity that there's a 5% chance of something happening versus 9%. For example, prior to going to a picnic, would you worry about and prepare for the 5% chance of it's going to rain, while the forecast calls for a 95% chance of sunshine? Facing conflict and getting lost in avoidance, we really do hunker down and expect a disaster, or we start to prepare for the worst. It's a brain bias. We just don't even think about it. Another big brain bias is negativity bias. This is actually from a research study at NIMH, National Institutes of Mental Health. It's amazing what we can do with computers and research these days. Given a screenshot like this to participants in 4 quadrants, the computer's allowed to watch where your eye moves. What is it that you're focusing on? What they found was those struggling with anxiety or depression spent more time looking at the child crying. The negativity bias is looking for what's wrong at the exclusion of what's good. So the treatment was to encourage looking at the other positive photos as well, the other positive events. So not excluding, but accepting that bad happens, but then also good happens. This is what works. Another lovely bias. This is prospects theory. If you haven't heard of it, Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics. Basically says that we feel loss more than we feel gain. We kind of expect the loss is what we're learning here, right? Here's a rather simple story to provide an example of prospect theory. One bright and sunny day, I was at the park concession stand. I was getting some ice cream cone for my niece. You walk up and say, "Hi, how you doing? Nice day, isn't it?" And I feel happy and generous. And I give you one of my 2 ice cream cones. You probably react by saying, "Thank you, I love ice cream." And since I want us to be good friends, I might even try to double down and hand you the second ice cream cone. You might respond even more enthusiastically, making you appear and potentially feel happier now that you have 2 cones, twice the gain. However, if I were to ask you to return the second cone because I need to give it to my niece, your mind would focus in on the loss of having to return the cone rather than the fact that you're still holding the first cone. This is all automatic. Without thinking about your thinking, you would feel the loss before your mind had time to recognize the original gain. Our thoughts and feelings are often automatic, and they may or may not be true. Confirmation bias. This is a big one. Have you heard about this new habit? It's called pandemic-induced doom scrolling. Everyone's on their computers or their cell phones searching for evidence to back up their fears, to illuminate their worries, or to prove that you are right about some topic. It's also about hitting the news feed on your phone over and over, hoping that an update will come soon so that you can find out what's happening that you need to know right now. Doom scrolling really doesn't work. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in the way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. It is an important type of cognitive bias that has a significant effect on the proper functioning of society by distorting evidence-based decision-making. And I need to add that our government often gets stuck in confirmation bias. each side seeking data to support what they believe is right. And I do wonder sometimes if government might be willing to see behind their adversaries' eyes, to seek understanding, to find common ground. We must have experienced that sometime in the last 200 years, do you think? What works for you? If you were able to put away the means to compare yourself to someone else, begin to see yourself as all humans are. We are all limited and deficient. Accepting this, sad for maybe what doesn't work, hopeful for what does work. What else would you need? What does that look like? For many of us, moving away from old, inflexible habits that no longer work offer short-term gain, but they come at a long-term cost. Humans need other humans. Today, our humanity depends less on our verbal IQ or how much college or money or muscle mass we have, less about who's right and who's wrong, and more on our human capacity, our emotional IQ, our capacity to accept, to forgive, to let go, and move forward. Yes, psychological flexibility. Research abounds with proof that positive psychology works, that self-compassion is real, is rich, is rewarding, and life-sustaining. There is just no doubt about it. We need to shift to find our center. Eating, sleeping, exercise, it supports our ability to move forward. Your diet fuels your body and your brain. It's hard to make good decisions jacked up on sugar or coffee or junk food. Would you put low quality gasoline into your car? And how far do you think you could go, or where would you go? Restorative sleep is so important because the brain needs you to stop, to rest, in order to lay down memories and organize what you've learned for the day. You have to stop thinking. You have to rest so the brain can do its repair. It actually repairs all the broken synapses, the connections that happened while you were busy thinking all day long. When you wake up in the morning after experiencing a bad night's sleep, your brain is most likely a bit foggy. Worse if you're hungover from too much fun. Yeah, there's that short-term gain, but that long-term loss. Exercise. Does anybody remember what a mitochondria is? Those little powerhouses? They generate most of the chemistry, the chemical energy needed to power up your cells' biochemical reactions. Without a tank full of adenosine, triphosphate, or ATP, your body is not going to go very far. It really won't work. Exercise helps build your energy. When you look outside and see that it's raining, you probably don't leave your house without some type of rain gear, a jacket, an umbrella. Same type of check-in is needed every day to ask yourself how you're doing. Check in, check your weather. How are you doing emotionally, mentally, physically? To be prepared for the day, even if you're staying home, check in with yourself. Try waking up each day asking yourself, what do I need to make this a good day? How will I take care of myself What do I need to do to get myself centered? Inhabiting your center, mindfully breathing one breath at a time, in and out, taking action that supports what you've stated as your goals and your values, and then practicing them so you get pretty good at it, so they become automatic, your new automatic habits. If you're still with me, I'd like us to do an exercise together. So put down what you're doing, put down your phone, stop your doom scrolling, and stand up. Everybody, I don't know if we can do this. I'm standing up. Stand up on both feet. Come on, everybody needs to stretch a little. You can stretch up and back and down. But mostly I want you to feel your feet on the ground, to be grounded. So right now my toes, my feet, my ankles are doing a little bit of bounce up and down. I'm feeling steady, calm. I'm feeling balanced. Everybody there? Get up, stretch. Next, I want you to try to lift one foot just slightly off the ground and try to stay balanced. Balance. You can find the balance. Now I want you to try and tip yourself just a little bit, trying to stay balanced. Feel that. Okay, now you can come back center, put your foot down, sit back down or resume the position, whatever that was. Centered. I wanted to do this so we can all know together what it feels like to be centered, how it feels, this cognitive word centered. It's in your body, that physical sensation of feeling solidly on the ground. Another reason is that you're mindful of the opposite. When you don't feel centered, but off balance. When you don't feel centered, when somebody or something or some thought or some emotion pulls you away from your center, remember you have a physical and mental posture, and it takes practice to do this, to mindfully find and inhabit your center. Our breathing is an important skill for centering too. For example, when your breathing becomes a little fast, your brain might think something's wrong. And so its habit is to start a chemical cascade that prepares you to panic, to fight or flee. You can counter that command by slowing down your breathing, saying something like, I'm okay, breathe, say it's okay, this will be okay. A calming breath helps you find and get yourself recentered. You can try this exercise while you're standing in line, especially now. Try to find your center and practice calming breaths while you wait in line again each day. It is impossible to be focused 24/7. When you notice yourself mindlessly doing some action that doesn't fit with what you declared as a value, stop, take a step back, center yourself and say, trying this again, and then move forward. Don't beat yourself up for slipping back into old habits. Remembering you have to let go to move forward. You might have to take one step back, recenter, and then move forward. Practice. Almost everything needs, any idea that you want to have and to have it readily available, you need to practice. Thinking about these constructs. You may say, oh, this is good. Yeah, I'll try that. Put that on your list of things to do. But you have to put the time in to do the work. To be able to change an old habit, you have to practice a new one. You have to practice it so the new one is just as strong and readily available as the old ones. It might just save your life. For example, if you had to get out of town quickly, if you just needed to get out of your house and move, what would your plan be? Would you drive, walk, run? On 9/11/2001, a guy I know was in downtown Manhattan in the financial district. At 8:46 a.m., he watched in total belief as American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower. He immediately knew he needed to get out fast. He didn't panic, but he began to problem solve. He couldn't drive his car. The bridges quickly became crowded. His thoughtful mind led him to the store around the corner, where he bought a bike and he rode out of Manhattan. If he didn't know how to ride the bike, he wasn't going to learn it in that moment. You have to practice new cognitive skills to get good enough, to get them to be automatic. Ask any athlete, ask Michael Jordan, great musician, if you want to require these skills in order to take action when you need them, and you need to practice. You need to do the work. Your self-talk shapes your outlook, shapes your perspective. If negative thoughts are not truer, why would you get stuck on them? Or why would you give them your time and attention? Think about this. What are you not doing while you're searching for the negative outcome? Are you willing to give yourself permission to build your willingness to be open and curious and to imagine what else could be true? To ask yourself, how would I do that? What steps do I need? What tools do I need? I have another example or exercise I'd like us all to try. This time you don't have to get out of your chair unless you want to. I want you to reach your hand out and make a fist. And I want you to really squeeze that fist. Squeeze it as tight as you can. So what do you feel your hand? What do you feel in your hand? What do you feel in your wrist? My arm's shaking a little bit. Your arm, your shoulder, your neck. And think, what actions can you take when you make a fist? Using your tight fist as a representation of how inflexible thinking traps your fist in a posture that is restrictive and limited. Now let go. Wow, the blood's rushing back. What do you feel? Make sure you breathe. Let the blood flow. Let go. Wiggle your hand, your arm, shake it out. Now what can you do with your open hand, with your flexible hand? You can shake someone else's hand, maybe not right now. You could caress your face, you could wipe your brow, you could pet your therapy dog or stroke your cat. I hope this gives you a physical memory of inflexible versus flexible. Use it whenever you feel stuck and you're wondering if you're being flexible in the moment that requires you to be flexible. Oh, I like this picture. Anyone here know how to sail? I learned. My husband wanted me to learn. It's not easy to sail, but it is a true joy once you've learned how to navigate along with the wind. Tacking is such a flexible action. Checking the wind, moving in the direction that keeps the boat headed where you want it to go. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. And the realist adjusts their sails. Which one represents your thoughts? Can you change your thoughts? Can you ride the wave or sail that boat? Can you work with the wind? Working with the wind works. Against the wind, not so much. It's a calming photo. I don't know, like a. Okay, we ended that section before we move to reboot. Adam, how are we doing on any questions or clarifications?
Sure. So we have a couple that were from previous sections. Would you like me to ask them now or wait until the end of your presentation?
If you wanted to pick one, or I mean, you tell me at what time we have. Should we wait?
I think it might be better to wait and make sure that we can get through all the content so people have it, and then we can round out the presentation with any questions that we have with the remaining time.
Okay, and that's good because often I'll touch on a topic and then it gets more clear, comes clearer in the next section. So moving forward. So here we are at the reboot, the last section, helping to create a plan to move forward, how to determine our values to live well, how to build your willingness in the here and now to make that action possible, to assess and take stock in your capacity and your ability for self-acceptance, and then also visualizing the value direction and taking action towards that. All right, so we're coming back to that page I asked you to start at the beginning about developing your vision for living a valued life. Really need to start thinking, or you maybe already have, hopefully through this, what's of value to you? What does it look like? Take another moment now to write down your thoughts about why you believe this value is important. Does it make you feel alive? Does it make you feel purposeful, important? If I valued my health, my life would. If I valued my marriage, I would. I value my parenting, and I will learn more about parenting. Are these values your values or someone else's values? Values you've come to know and adopt now as an adult that may have been given to you earlier on by parents or grandparents? What do you believe would add meaning and value to your life day after day, year after year? Develop a vision for living your values. We've got to identify, declare, Just write a sentence or two, no paragraphs. This is the beginning of the work. So on a fresh sheet of paper, try and draw a little head that's yours. I love doing this in session. I usually put some curly hair here, and I have to decide whether to smile or just kind of you. This is you. This is your head. This is your mind. And above your mind, what's on your mind are these values. I've thrown some in there. You can throw in whatever you want. So draw your little head, draw some thought bubbles. Make those the things that you recognize that are weighing on your mind day in, day out. How many bubbles are you drawing? Keep in mind how realistic it is that you could have so much on your plate, so much to manage every single day. Don't forget one of the bubbles of what we've been talking about so far, taking care of you, of creating that base. That base can also support all the other bubbles that you believe bring value to your life. I don't know how old everyone is, but some of us might recall an act on television where some acrobats had poles and they were spinning the plates on that pole. And the whole time you were watching, you're just waiting for the plates to fall. They didn't usually fall. These guys were professionals, but you can think about that. We can have too many plates in the air. Or for those of you that are cooks like me, you can have too many pots on the stove. You can't get to everything. You have to know your capacity. Can you cook one thing at a time, two things at a time? I mean, realistically, 6 pots on a stove top, something's going to burn and something's probably not going to get cooked. But guess what I'm asking you to do is, this is your mind. How much can you handle? And what are the most important things you need to remember to get through every day? To focus on what you know you can have the most impact on, but will also be in concert and honoring what you say that you value. When you determine what it is that you value, then you need to really build some willingness to do the work with this. This is a picture of Muir Woods. Anyone been there? On the trails in Northern California, Muir Woods. It's just so gorgeous. I was walking through and I was struggling with some difficult clients, high conflict parents and custody mediation. When I walked on this path, it struck me that I could share this scene, if I could share this scene with some of my more difficult clients. Perhaps I could get them to see that a path can come together and then they can also separate in the best interest of their child and also in themselves. The conflict didn't need to be angry and verbally violent. They could both separate, they could both go their own peaceful path. So again, with your willingness, if you could have the life that you want, what would you be willing to do to make it a reality? I wanted a better relationship with my children. I took one class in child development. I learned a lot. It also started a very difficult conversation, painful conversation, and it led to very big changes. My new ideas about parenting didn't really go over well up against a lot of groupthink. Remember, my family has 12 members. My husband and I took a different path to raise our small children, and we do not regret for 1 minute living that value. So the other thing you have to, like we were talking about, too many plates, too many values. Another way to really tap into your gut and what is of value, just remember what you were thinking when you were small, what you were feeling. What did you love? When you were swinging on that swing, you had no cares in the world. When you were sliding down that slide and just enjoying the wind or the smell of the leaves or jumping in the leaves, think of those things as values too. Too often my clients tell me about what they regret, what they should have done, what they should be doing. I usually look up on my bookshelf filled with psychology textbooks, self-help books, Buddhist teachings, and I ask if they can find the book of shoulds. Shoulds are the mental controls, rules someone, perhaps thinking it was good for you, gave to you to be good, to be right, to be proper. Shoulds don't work. They are a bias that shapes and blames. They're not useful. They're not workable. Examples of shoulds: boys are stoic and don't cry. Girls can't be doctors or lawyers or CEOs. Change can be difficult to sustain, and we need support. So don't be afraid to declare your values and ask people close to you what they can do to help support your valued actions. They too might use that opportunity to ask you to support them as well. Too many of us wish we were different: taller, shorter, thinner, career, blonde, red, brunette, curly. There's a $1 billion industry that caters to promoting your self-denigration and betting on the fact that you will put yourself out there to compete to be better. Tons of money is spent to psych you out, to promise if you drink this, pop this, buy this, you will be better looking, more popular, la, 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 la. The promise of happiness is a $1 billion industry. What are you not doing while you're measuring your worth using marketing companies' measuring tape? What could you be doing if you invested in what you value, what you have control over? What would you be willing to invest to go all in? The secret to living well and longer is eating half, walk double, laugh triple, and love without measure. Please visualize what it is. What are those actions that you value? I realize living in Washington, D.C. can jack people up to be more, to be better, to work harder. And in my office, I have a lot of fun little rubber balls. Where did it go? It's a world globe. So I ask my clients, if you lived somewhere else, would you still have these thoughts and feelings? Would you still feel pressured? What's the context of your shoulds? What's the context of telling you what you should or shouldn't do? What if you were really okay already? What could you choose to build around that thought? I'm okay. What do I want? I won't read this, but it is an example of a plan that one of my clients had. He wanted to be a better friend, to be kinder, to be a more joyful person. He wrote out a statement and worked on the goals to support that action. Your plan doesn't have to be perfect, written out, followed to the letter. It's a start. It's one red sock at a time. It's one meal at a time. As you take action on your plan, you can use your skills to assess its workability, to make minor adjustments, like the surfer on the wave or the sailor in the boat. Considering your capacity, keep growing, learning, adding and subtracting. You have the wheel. You are driving this action, your values, your action. You've got this. Keep going. Keep moving forward. That's what I got. Thank you for listening.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Atwater. I know a lot of people have been sending in questions, and so I think right now we can transition for the last 10 minutes or so. And then if we do go over, and if you have the time, and for those that can stay on, we can always, visit those if we'd like. For those of you who asked about resources, I mentioned that Dr. Atwater would be sharing some towards the end of her presentation. Here is some of the information that she had. So, Dr. Atwater, in turning to the questions, one question that we got in kind of various iterations related to the individual and the group. So the question reads, what if I am mostly living with psychological flexibility, but the people around me are mostly living experiential avoidance? It makes it really hard to solve problems and collaborate to perform work. How could I address this with other adults?
Good question. That's what it felt like being the 7th out of 10. We do have to find our own peeps. We have to find our own hoods. And so that's difficult. I think when I joined the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, I found some peeps. I found some people who were resonating around the same hum that I was. That doesn't mean I live with them, but it does mean that I'd go in and get my good stuff and feel good. And I also have to say, I started this conversation a couple of years back. I'm a mediator. I think I was a born mediator. 7th out of 10, somebody had to do some mediation. But when I went to my first mediation conference, I called my husband and I said, oh my God, I found my peeps. I was wearing blue jeans. I had my cowgirl boots on. I wasn't wearing makeup. My hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and I just never felt more like me in my life. So I guess I would say you might have to work with people who are psychologically inflexible, but seek out groups that you can start to belong to and feel like you belong with. That's such a strong need for humans, a longing to belong. I hope that answered that question.
Thank you. And I really like that. I think it summarizes human nature very well, the longing to belong. There was another question, and this kind of came in during the image of the wave that you had shown a little bit earlier. And so it says that it's hard to keep anxiety under control when my state is in an upward positive case trend, the second wave. I do monitor the facts to see the latest news and updates, but I can't help but fall in that dark, scary place that my mind goes to. I used to be so upbeat and outgoing, and I'm having trouble dealing with that aspect. Do you have any tips?
I'm not sure of the clarification of the first wave versus the second. It's another metaphorical, like you can make it through the first wave, but the second wave just comes a little harder. Is that what he was saying, or she was saying?
I'm not sure. I don't have further information, but I think that would be an okay assumption.
I'm not sure who said it, but in Buddhism, there is an expression of riding the waves, riding the tides. And when we recognize that we are part of the waves, it's less suffering because we're not the boat getting battered around. We actually are the waves. And the more that we can really let go of the heaviness, of the weightiness of our thoughts, the easier it is to ride the wave, whether just floating or bobbing in a tube. You're just part of that big ocean. We feel isolated when we feel like we're the ones that are getting battered. And it's not a victim stance per se, but it is a way of taking a whole different view. There's so much material on this, both in Buddhism and in ACT, that we can have thoughts, but the thoughts might not really be helpful or workable. So you want to expand back and also say what else could be true. Or maybe you need to feel sad in order to move forward.
Thank you. And I got a few comments that it was related to COVID and the second wave, which
Okay, yeah.
now makes a lot of sense.
Okay, this is difficult, isn't it?
And so another question that we had, I think, perhaps focuses on some of the biases that you mentioned, specifically negativity bias. And so the question reads, when we're in a crisis situation, some of us get fixated on the negative thoughts and behaviors. Do you have any suggestions as to how to break our focus on the negative thoughts and consider thoughts that encourage flexibility?
That's a good one. I believe the research out there says that for every, I don't want to say, you can't get rid of things. You can't cut out the negative, but you can reinform the negative that it's not more true. So that's a big statement I say all the time. Your negative thoughts are not more true than your positive ones. So why would you spend more time in the negative place? In the negative place, you have a cascade of chemistry, neurochemistry, adrenaline, cortisol. They actually make you sick. So if you think about your health and continuing to swirl into a negative thought pattern, you're not helping yourself. So whatever, I mean, I like to go back to when you were a kid, what made you feel good? Get up, get outside, take a walk, hang from a tree, swing from a tree, do something where your mind stops engaging in Yamarupa over and over and over and chewing, and it backs up into, oh gosh, leaves, air. You have to switch the focus. So that's just number one. And then you start to also look for ways for how can I take care of myself. So when you know it's going to be rough, make sure you walk in the room with a pillow or something to drink or gum to chew on or a ball to squeeze. You have to take care of yourself during the negative times. And that helps a lot of people.
Great, thank you. And so I think we have officially time for one more, but we had two more questions that have been posed. So I'll ask the first one, and then we can go to the second one if you have time. So relating to the quote with the sailboat, a lot of people have really enjoyed that image, as have I. The question reads, is it possible that when faced with difficulty, you can go through all of those stages referring to being a pessimist, a realist, and an optimist?
Oh, absolutely. I do every day. I might have this thought, and I think, well, what else could I think? And then I have this thought, and then I think, what else could I think? And then I think, which of those thoughts are going to get me where I need to go? The other thoughts aren't not true, but they're not as useful or workable.
Great. And so I actually misspoke. We have another quick question and then one that might be a little bit of a longer question. So for the quick one, it reads, early on in the presentation, you mentioned something related to the new normal that should be referred to something else. What was that other saying that would be more helpful to use?
Oh, I think the word workable. So a lot of my clients will say, I should have done that. I should have done that. I'm like, I don't know about what you should have done, but what would work? Even if you just give yourself a minute to think about all of your options, or, I mean, you can beat yourself up. Like when we have 3 children, when they messed up, when they lied, when they did anything, I didn't say, well, that's bad or whatever. I said, what'd you learn? And did it work? And if it didn't work, what are you going to do differently next time so you get the outcome you're looking for? So not normal, but what works.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And so our last question before we round it out is if you could address the subject of self-forgiveness in the context of moving forward, For example, in cases of grief, do you recommend any ways that you can process grief and forgive in order to move forward?
Yeah, grief is a tough one, but it's everywhere. It's there's no way to avoid grief. We grieve all the time. I don't think we recognize that we do. So I guess it depends on what it is that you're grieving, because people have such great guilt, like they should have done something different. So then you go back into the shoulds. So we have to forgive ourselves for being limited and deficient and not having the answers, not being able to save someone even though we had the idea of what they should have done, but you don't have control like that. You have to focus in on what do I have control over. And if we find ourselves not having any control, we have to take nice deep breaths and forgive ourselves for our inability to help someone when we would really like to, because we're not in control. We can't take their wheel and make them do what we want. So grief sometimes is regret of not taking action, but you don't know if your action was going to work or not work. It's like betting on the horses. Which one's going to win? It's just not workable.
Great.
Grief. Oh,
And
so grief is addressed really in the happiness trap. It's addressed in mindfulness and self-compassion. Brene Brown at selfcompassion.org. Everyone touches on grief. It's something to talk about. Is ask other people how they got through it. Ask the people that you trust and love and say, how do you manage grief?
yeah, I think that's great. And one, I want to thank you so much for your time, for being with us today.
Sure.
I know I've gotten a lot of comments that people have really enjoyed the topic that you've been able to present on, and a lot of people have been, asking about these resources and how can I learn more and how can I move forward, which I think is fantastic. A brief note I wanted to say for all our NETL participants, there's no password for today, but what we'll be doing is we'll be sending a list out, and so then that way you'll get credit for attending. And, with that, again, I just wanted to thank you so much, Dr. Atwater.
Sure.
And, until next time, everyone, thank you.
Yeah. Happy Conflict Resolution Day.
Yes, and same to you.
Bye.
Yes, thank you. Don't forget to email us. We've sent the information through the chat if you'd like the slides or have any questions about future events. And I know I learned a lot today, and I'm looking forward to a deep stretch a little bit after this.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you, Dr. Atwater.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe, everyone.
You too.